Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. Come on, Father. This is madness. Camille was indignant. Do you really want to rewrite the will? But she doesn't love you. She only got involved with you for the money. Don't you realize that? I've said it all, Stephen replied sternly. I'm not going to discuss my personal life with you. You and your brother are adults. You can take care of yourselves. I finalized the divorce with your mother a month ago. I certainly don't owe her anything. The rest is none of your business. Communication with her father had become unbearable. Camille had been trying to talk to him for months. But every time it was about Emily, it was as if he had been replaced. He became rude and didn't want to hear anything. It had been over a year since he'd gotten involved with that promiscuous girl. It was hard to call her anything else. And within months of meeting her, he was already talking about divorcing the woman he'd lived with his entire life. Evelyn was heartbroken when she found out her husband had another woman. It happens to all of them. What can you do? Her friends tried to convince her to get over it. You realize you're getting old, and she's young. That's what he needs, a fiery body of unbridled passion. What else can he connect with a simple waitress without higher education? She can't even speak a word. She doesn't even have anything to talk about. In a year or two, he'll realize he made a mistake and come back to his family. They always do. But it wasn't as simple as they made it sound. Talk of divorcing and marrying Emily continued unabated. Stephen stopped being like himself. He often forgot work events, was late for meetings, and could oversleep. For the first few months after they met, he spent every night with Emily. But as soon as she managed to get the divorce proceedings started, she started disappearing more often, calling less often, coming less often. She refused to move into his house before the wedding. It was as if he didn't even notice. The mother left the house long before the divorce was finalized. Son Christopher gave her money not only for the apartment, but also took care of all other expenses until the division of property. Unlike his sister, he did not want to get involved in family squabbles. He just didn't have time for it. The business was just starting to grow. His wife waited at home every night. He sincerely sympathized with his mother, but he did not think he had the right to give advice to his father. Their family had never been perfect. It was just like everyone else's. The only thing that made their life different from ordinary people was money. Dad always took responsibility. When money was scarce, he never complained, but went and worked. He was always active and purposeful. He wanted to take the best out of life and believed he had the right to do so. Like any man who fully and completely takes responsibility for the fate of his wife and children. From time to time, the father snapped. Christopher well remembered some scandals that happened when he was still a teenager. Then he did not understand why his father could be so angry sometimes. It seemed to him that he had no right to raise his voice. He did overreact a lot, and he never apologized for it. But to betray the family, it was impossible. When Christopher found out that Stephen had decided to divorce, he didn't interfere. I'm an adult. I have my own life, my own family. What right do I have? He thought to himself. He did not give any assessments, nor his father's new sweetheart. He knew that she was much younger than him. But that's nothing new these days. Many mature men choose young companions and live happily with them. How is the father any worse? No matter how much it hurt his mother, it was life. And he was sure that she should be accepted for what she was, not try to change what was impossible. Camille tried to change Stephen's mind as best she could, but he let all his daughter's arguments pass by his ears. All conversations had no sooner begun than they ended in scandals, but up to this point, there had never been any talk of a will. Yes, Father, you're absolutely right. I shouldn't concern myself with your personal life, and I'm an adult. I can take care of myself, Camille continued. But you have no right to give this trash, the family property that you and your mother have built up over the years, and that rightfully belongs to your own children, the rightful heirs. Your mother never worked a day in her life, Stephen said, raising his tone. She's been sitting on my neck all her life. I was the one who did the plowing. She's my property and no one else's. She's already gotten her share in the divorce. I ain't done nothing to her. I owe her nothing more. She's been on your back all her life. What about us? Who raised us? Took us to kindergarten, to school, took us for walks. You were never home. You were always traveling on your business trips and at work all day long. Did you forget you had nannies, tutors, school fees? That's what this whole banquet is for, daughter. At whose expense? At your expense. It was all paid for by your daddy, who, as you say, was never home. If it wasn't for me, you'd be living in squalor like most ordinary people. All the clothes, the jewelry, the apartment, that was all paid for by me too. Now I have the right to live for myself. And so that if, God forbid, something happens to me, there will be no scandals between you, and you, Emily, in the courts did not drag. I'm not making a will. I'm giving her a deed of gift. What makes you think you and Christopher are my only heirs? I'm not that old. I'm only 47 years old. Emily, you're still young. We'll have children. They'll get all my fortune. I've given you a good upbringing and a good education. Now take care of yourselves. Hearing these words, Camille turned pale. She had never felt such anger and resentment before. How dare he accuse his mother of sitting on his neck? She gave her whole life to us, and that she was left alone in the middle of nowhere. She thought to herself, you know what I'll tell you, Daddy. If you give her all your possessions, you're not my father anymore. I don't want to know you. I'll go to my apartment and never come back here again. Live here with your dyed-in-the-wool, yelled at Camille's father. It's come to this. Don't forget who gave you that apartment. It's the same dad who never took part in your upbringing. He was always away on business trips and never home for months. You'd be living in a rented apartment now, working day and night to pay the rent and buy something to eat. She's still young. You haven't seen life, Stephen replied. I'm not keeping you. Go. Camille slammed the door loudly. Resentment swept over her. It was the first time she'd heard her father say those words. Turns out that's how he really felt about them. She and her mom, who had given her all to the family, leaving her career behind after Christopher was born, putting his ambitions on the back burner. His whole life has been a burden to him. Let him think what he wants about us. But I can't let the family estate go to some skank, Camille thought, dialing Christopher's number. Hello, yes, brother, are you busy? Through her tears, she said into the phone, Camille, why are you crying? Did something happen to your mom again? Or did your father as usual? Christopher asked excitedly. My brother, we have something going on here. I really need your help. I can't do it without you. Camille, but you know that. I told you, I don't want to get involved in any of this. I got myself a young girl. Yeah, asshole. I'm not even gonna argue with that. I haven't talked to him since this whole thing started. But I don't have the time or inclination to get involved in this mess. Yeah, Christopher, don't you see? She'll cheat him. She'll take it all away. And then she'll come looking for her. I understand you don't want to get involved. But he's never even mentioned what he said to Christopher today. He's going to give her a deed to all the property he and Mom split up. Well, take pity on your father. He's gonna be a pauper right after that bitch owns the whole fortune. Camille, well, property. But he's also got a business. He's not likely to sign over a whole chain of jewelry stores to her. She wouldn't be able to run a business like that. Well, he'll lose that. He'll make more money. Christopher, what are you talking about? What do you mean, she'll lose and make money? Are you out of your mind? There are several apartments, houses, summer houses, cars, bills. Why should we sit around and wait for some provincial scum to steal from us? After all, you're his only son. You can influence him. Talk to him, please. For my sake, for Mom's sake, for our family's sake, after all. Christopher didn't believe he could do anything. He tried to avoid sharp edges. When he talked to his father, the last time they'd spoken was 2 months ago. Stephen had told him about how they had worked with the jeweler to create models of the pendant necklace and ring for Emily. He himself couldn't believe his father had left his mother so quickly and so easily, treating her like a used item that had fallen into disrepair. But it's his life and his act can't be changed, because you can't undo what has already happened. What if Camille is wrong? She's just too emotional. Maybe this Emily truly loves her father. But what's the big deal? Many young girls choose older men as husbands because they think they're reliable. They feel like they're behind a wall. And what if we're wrong? One thought after another flashed through Christopher's mind. He really wanted to believe that his father would be happy. After all, he had not deprived them of anything. All their lives, he and Camille had had the best of everything. In their childhood, tutors from one of the best schools in the capital. Father never denied them anything. Education in the best institutes in the country. Own apartment, they always had everything that many other people could not even dream of. Do they now have the right to claim for what their father earned, when they have already grown up, received education, and are able to provide for themselves independently? No, but it wasn't just about money. Camille was embarrassed by the age of her father's chosen one, her behavior, work, and many other things. Deep down, Christopher understood her. And that's the only reason he decided he had to talk to his father. If it turns out that Camille is right, and this girl is still using his father, it will be better if he finds out about it immediately and will not have illusions. It's much harder to get over a betrayal after years of living together. He thought to himself. Christopher had seen his mother when she had moved away from his father. He had helped her and supported her as best he could. There was no face on her. She hid her tears from her son, but she was not ashamed to cry in front of her daughter. Camille told her how hard it was for her, and of course, that didn't do her father any honor. But Christopher tried not to accuse him of anything. "Hello, Father. You're comfortable talking." He finally decided to call Stephen. "Yes, son. How long has it been since you called? I'm so glad." "You're all right," Stephen answered. "Yes, Dad, I'm fine. Say, could we get together? I really need to talk to you. If it's about Emily and Camille has already complained to you, I won't even listen. I'm sick of it. Eggs don't teach the chicken. I'm a wealthy adult, and I'm not going to listen to my own children telling me how to live my life. They're not old enough to be taught how to live. No, Dad, I'm just talking. I've got a lot of new things going on." "Well, sure, son. Come over tomorrow night. We'll have a drink in front of the fireplace. Have a good talk. I'll be there about 9 o'clock. That's not too late." "No, of course not. You know I'm incorrigible. I don't go to bed until the morning. I'll see you then, Dad." Of course he lied. Well, what else was there to do? Otherwise, Dad would have canceled the meeting. Well, it's worth a shot. It is only necessary to think over the conversation in a delicate way. Christopher began to think. He was serious about talking to his father. Deep down, he realized that there was a double situation from which there must be a way out. There just couldn't be. "What's up? How's it going with Jenna? Any grandchildren yet?" With a smirk, asked Stephen. "I would be just happy if my grandchildren and future children grew up together. From Camille yourself, you know, you cannot expect. She's not going to get married. She doesn't want kids either. She's still young. Where can she go now?" Christopher was puzzled when he heard this question. He was confused by his father's jokes about future children. No, of course, he realized that his father was not old yet. Everything could still be possible. But he did not like the idea of marriage as much as his sister. And it wasn't the inheritance, which neither he nor Camille really needed. They had the means to reach the same financial level as Stephen in 10 years' time. More than enough. But there was something about the marriage that didn't feel sincere. And not from the father's side, but from his lover's side. "I'm getting married soon. Son," Stephen continued, "I'm going to talk to Emily about the wedding. It's been a busy time. You know, I want everything to be of the highest order. I mean, it's such an event for me. Emily's getting married for the first time in her life. I want her to remember her wedding for the rest of her life. Where is Emily now? Or doesn't she live with you now? Her mom's sick. She goes straight to her house after work. I offered to hire a nurse, but she said no. All by herself, nothing by herself. After the wedding, I'll give her so much care and love. I'll do everything for her. She won't need anything from me. Mom, is she from the capital? I thought you said she came from some small town I can't remember the name of. Yes, she's from Lipetsk, but she and my mom moved here a few years ago. She couldn't have left her alone, Emily. She's been working in a cafe for a year now. Her mom rents a place for her. But I'll talk to her that maybe it's better to send her back home with a nurse. There's fresh air there, not like here. My father didn't go to the capital with them. He survived there. He had cancer a long time ago. He died a few years ago. And so they suffered and suffered. Yes, they'd moved here to live. You know, there's no decent wages there, no prospects. They're planning to sell the house. Maybe they'll have enough for a down payment in the capital. She won't need all this. She'll live with me. I plan to write her a deed of gift before the wedding. Christopher was careful to ask questions so as not to provoke his father into a scandal. He'd never said anything nasty about Emily. And now it played into both his and Camille's hands. Christopher was the only person his father trusted. He could gently ask him anything that was important to get any chance of finding out who Emily really was and how she felt about her father. They talked for several hours, and in that time they never once had a fight. Stephen was so enthusiastic in sharing his future wedding plans of honeymooning, traveling, and living together that Christopher felt sorry for him. If it all came crashing down in an instant, it would be hard for his father to accept. He was actually in love with this Emily. I guess it happens to all men his age. Would I ever do the same thing to my Jenna? Christopher thought to himself. The thought made him uncomfortable. Even though he was still young, he could understand the feelings of a 45-year-old man. He and his sister had never meddled with their parents, so they didn't know what had been going on between them all these years. Maybe the father had really fallen out of love with the mother. Perhaps their feelings had been shattered by years of domesticity and shared responsibilities. They went through a difficult time when there was no money for anything at all. Christopher was just born then, so he does not remember this period. They married very young. They lived in a small room in his parents' apartment. His father was always working and striving for something. He walked through life with courage and confidence. There were no impossible tasks for him. His mother devoted herself to her home and children. At one time, at the beginning of her career, she left medical practice because she got pregnant. Maybe the father was really bored with that kind of life. Deep down, Christopher understood why he and Jenna were in no hurry to have children. Subconsciously, he felt that if she focused on the house, he might eventually get bored with her. Christopher made a decent living, but to Jenna her small business was just as important. She was well educated and drew beautifully. She devoted all her time to art. She even had 2 exhibitions in the capital. But what kind of paints ideas if there are children in the house? No, this will never happen to me. Everything will be different in my family, Christopher thought to himself. Looking at his father, Christopher interrupted his thoughts. Stephen, nothing. I'm so about life, replied Christopher. Father, I'm happy for you. In fact, if you have truly met your love, I am truly, truly happy. No matter what you do, you will always be my father, and I will always be your son. I want you to know that you can always count on my support. Thank you, son. I knew you'd understand. Is Camille at your place tonight, or has she moved in? No, she should be home. She's in the process of moving. The renovation just finished. She'll move in as soon as the furniture arrives. I'm actually looking forward to it. I want Emily to move in with me permanently, not intermittently. Camille's been living here and dealing with Camille's scandals. And you know your sister. Well, I'll go and see her. We'll go for a walk before we go to bed. Okay, son, I'm going to bed. Come back often. Don't forget your father. Christopher knocked on his sister's room. "Camille, are you awake at home?" asked Christopher's brother. "I'm so glad you came." She threw herself around his neck. "You talk to your father quietly. You close the door. We need to talk. I'm listening to you very carefully." "Yes, I talked to my father. Maybe we should go to the cafe. It's not far. I'll drive you back home later. I don't think we should talk about this here. Are you afraid of something?" "No, of course not, Camille. In case my father hears." They drove to the nearest cafe. "So is Camille going to change her father's mind or openly insult him?" "Emily, there's no point. It won't lead to anything but scandals. You have to be careful. I don't like it myself. I suggest we follow her." "What do you mean, follow her?" "Yes, in the direct sense. Keep a close eye on her. Who is she? What does she do?" "Remember, he said they met at the Universal restaurant. It's in the center near Tverskaya. I looked it up. She works there. That's what he said. I suggest we follow her, but not while she's in the restaurant. That way we won't know anything. She works all day. We should see where she goes after work, where she lives, what she does on weekends. I find it very strange that they're getting ready for a wedding. And she only comes to see her father twice a week at best." "Yes, her father. I mean, she said her mom was sick, but she refused to sit her. And there's a strange story about her hometown of Lipetsk." "What about it?" "Well, supposedly she moved to the capital with her mom after her father died. No work, no money. They moved to the capital, rented some kind of accommodation here. But what kind of place? I don't know. I didn't ask anything, so that my father wouldn't suddenly suspect that I'm trying to find out and wouldn't get angry. He trusts me." "Christopher, you're like a detective story." Camille grinned. "All right, I get your idea, but who's gonna be watching? I mean, she knows our faces. Our father introduced her to her. She used to live under the same roof as me, and she still does from time to time. 100% she'll recognize us if she sees us." "Camille, but there's always someone to ask. That's insulting." "All right, let's go. I'll take you home. We'll start tomorrow. I'll call you." Christopher drove Camille back home, called his subordinate, and gave him an assignment for tomorrow. "What's up, sis?" "I was able to gather some information. It's not everything, but it's something." Christopher's voice came through the phone. "You didn't call for so long. I was beginning to worry that you forgot about our case," she replied. "Well, what did you want? It's not like it's a quick fix, so we got lucky. My man's been working for a week, and in that time he's been able to track Emily's movements. There's more, but we don't have those results yet. Let's meet tonight at the coffee shop where we sat last time I visited my father. John will be with us. That's the man I asked to gather information." "Okay, I'll see you then." She was very glad that Christopher had agreed to help. It was the only way out. Emily came twice this week. Her father had already wanted to call a notary to reissue all the property to her, but they still couldn't agree on a day at night. The notary wouldn't go. Emily was coming home too late and leaving for work early in the morning. She was behaving extremely suspiciously. Stephen had already repeatedly suggested that she quit her job and work on the wedding preparations. In a week's time, they should be filing the application. They had already agreed on a day when Emily would be free and could go with her father to the wedding agency. In the afternoon, if only to have time to learn something before then and open all the cards to her father. Camille thought to herself. The day Christopher had called her was like a stone had fallen from her soul. She was looking forward to the evening and even arrived at the cafe an hour earlier than they had agreed. "Hi. You've been waiting a long time." Christopher appeared so suddenly that Camille even flinched in surprise when he came up behind her. "Oh, you scared me. Don't sneak up on me again," she said sternly but jokingly. "Where's your friend who was gathering information?" "He went to wash his hands. He'll be right back." "And you, I see. No time to waste," grinned the young man, looking at 6 empty cups of coffee. "I got here early. There was nothing to do. Look, I'm so nervous. But we found out. How are we gonna tell my dad? He's blind and deaf when it comes to Emily. He's not gonna believe us. He'll say we're lying. Look, let's solve problems as they come, not make a big deal out of nothing. Well, meet my sister Camille. What a pretty name, huh? Said the young man, extending his hand to the girl. Nice to meet you. Christopher, you have already told about me. And by the way, only good things. John, we have not only a man who can keep terrible secrets, but also a professional in his work. True, in his time he traded computer technology for a sparkling and irresistible desire to dig into other people's secrets. But as you can see, that's exactly the skill you and I need. Christopher grinned. Stop mocking me. I'll get offended. By the way, digging into other people's secrets is not such a nasty and disgusting job. Looking into the depths of human sin is interesting and fascinating, joked the young man. Okay, let's get to the point. John took out of his bag a notebook, several envelopes and a notebook with some notes. You guys take a look. I'll order something. Creepy. What a hungry man. There's a disk in the laptop. Do you press that button as soon as you boot it up? John showed me. That's not all. There's a thumb drive in there, but it's displayed on the laptop itself. You'll see it as soon as you boot it up. You know the drill. Camille glanced at the pictures and the video and wasn't even surprised. Her worst guesses were coming true. It's what she expected. Christopher, did you see it? Yeah. She went to her brother. We should send all this to Dad at the post office. Let him look at his poor Emily. Camille, really? He'll know it's our doing. Besides, he might not believe us and say we edited the whole thing and it's photoshopped or not. That's not the way to do it, Christopher said. John, you can print these pictures out. Why? John wondered. They're on a flash drive. If you want to show them to someone, you can put the flash drive in an envelope. No, you have to print them out. The flash drive has to be downloaded. Dad may not want to do it, but we can print them out today, if only. At my place, John smiled. But it's too late for that now. Let me print them out tomorrow and give them to you somewhere in town. Okay, you got it. Give it to Camille, said Christopher. Camille, you make sure you put the envelope with the pictures in it. Not in my father's office, but in the mailbox outside the house, so he won't know we planted it. The mailbox is on the outside of the house, so anyone could have put them there. Makes sense. I'll do it, Camille said. All right, let's go home, shall we? John, if you don't mind, why don't we drop Camille off first, and then I'll drive you home and go to my place. Jen is already waiting for me. Christopher suggested. I suggest another option. Let me walk your sister home. It's not far. Can you go straight to Jenna's? I'll take a cab myself. John smiled. No, that's not a good idea. We don't want Dad to see us. He's already home anyway. He can see out the window. Even if he's not guarding me. Camille grinned. He's so strict. John asked in surprise. No, it's not that. As you may have guessed, we have a difficult family situation right now, and it's better not to make it worse. He'll start asking questions, word for word. Then he'll say we're always prying into his personal life, asking questions, and he doesn't ask about ours. That sort of thing. Okay, I hear you. No moonlit walks. John laughed. John liked Camille. He didn't even try to hide it. The next day, he called her first thing in the morning to arrange a meeting and to deliver the pictures. Camille realized that it would be more than just a business meeting. She didn't mind it either. John seemed responsible, kind, and fun. Now she was completely free, so she was open to new acquaintances. The next day, they sat in a restaurant and talked about life so simply. For the first time in a long time, Camille was distracted from her father's problem and felt happy. They stayed together until the night before. Camille didn't notice how the time flew by. It was for the best. At midnight, her father went to bed. No matter what the circumstances, he got up at 7 o'clock and went to sleep at midnight. John drove Camille to the house. At exactly 1:00 a.m., the lights in the windows were out. This allowed her to put the envelope with the photographs in the mailbox unnoticed. At the gate of the house, he sat looking at the photographs and thought of only one thing. Who could have put that envelope in the box? Where had it come from? Camille was not at home. He was really looking forward to her return to ask about it. He was not going to reveal the contents of the envelope to her. The only thing he was curious about was how this envelope had gotten into the mailbox outside the house. Stephen didn't see anything special about the pictures in almost all of them. Emily gets into various expensive cars. It's dusk outside. It is obviously a very deep night. A couple of shots from work where she is leaving a restaurant. What's the big deal? There's no telling where she might have gone. What was that supposed to tell me? Anonymous sender, he thought to himself. There were other questions in the back of his mind, but he didn't want to dive into those thoughts. She simply couldn't deceive him. He didn't want to believe it. There was no reason for her to hide anything from him. He didn't want to confirm his fears, so he just put the pictures back in the envelope and continued working. Camille didn't get home until late in the evening. John had invited her to a movie, and she was not averse to another evening together. She definitely liked him. In the hustle and bustle of business, and worrying about her father and the fate of her mother, she had completely stopped paying attention. John seemed to bring her back to life. She continued to be puzzled, but not so puzzled that she would spend all day long in these thoughts. Camille, it's you. Stephen's voice came. Daughter, come into my office. I need to talk to you. So this morning he took the mail out of the box and found an envelope. Now he wants to ask me if I saw who might have brought it and when. She thought to herself, that's a good thing. What? He had already had time to look at the pictures. It was important for her to know what conclusions he had drawn and what he planned to do to figure out how she and Christopher should proceed. Yeah, Dad, something's up. Do you look worried? Camille asked. No, I was just wondering if you've seen anyone unauthorized outside our house. Dad, what are you doing? I just got in. I left early this morning. It was business as usual. How could there be strangers here? We're surrounded by cottages. We're all neighbors. But maybe some friends of the neighbors were here, but I don't keep track of other people. It's not my thing. Maybe you can explain what happened. Stephen put an envelope on the table in front of his daughter. He wouldn't show the contents. It was a sign that he and his brother had failed. Today, I found this envelope in our mailbox that hangs on the gate, Stephen continued. I'd like to know how it got here. What's in it? Camille asked with genuine interest. It doesn't matter. I just want to know how it got here. I don't know. If you don't mind, I'll go to my room. I want to rest, locked in my room. She immediately texted Christopher, and the time for the meeting was late. So her brother replied that tomorrow he would wait for her at the same cafe in the evening. Camille immediately wrote to John. He replied that he would also drive up. Stephen stayed up most of the night. Emily did not come to see him again today. Of course, his sick mother was much more important than the wedding preparations. He realized that and had no idea what was really going on. The next evening, Christopher, Camille, and John gathered at the cafe. Can you imagine? He couldn't believe it. Camille was indignant. Are you sure about that? Christopher clarified. How can I tell you? When I came home, he was tense and strange, but nothing followed. As far as I can tell, he didn't have a fight with Emily, or there would have been such a scandal in the house that we would have known about it right away. I have an idea, John intervened, but it requires careful preparation. What kind of idea? Camille would do anything to get her father to react to the truth they were trying to tell him. I still have a timeline of her movements. I've been following her, keeping a notebook of her movements. But these notes are all in my handwriting. At the very least, they need to be retyped, because we can't put them in a drawer like this. But then put the videotape on a flash drive in an envelope too. Since the photo wasn't enough for him, it's already ironclad proof. He just can't ignore them. So what's the problem? Let's go right now, Camille responded. I'm a fast typist. We'll be done in an hour or so. It's late, John said. That's all right. Let's call a cab. Let's go to your place. Let Christopher go to Jenna's. She'll start suspecting him of something bad soon enough. Camille grinned. Her brother had been absent a lot of evenings lately. Camille returned home. It was just before morning when her father was still asleep. She carefully dropped the envelope with Emily's travel schedule into the mailbox and quietly picked up the envelope in the mailbox and quietly went up to her room, showered, changed, and left for work. Stephen did not leave the house that day. He was completely immersed in his work and was waiting for Emily in the evening. Tonight she would be with him, but he couldn't even think about the fact that it would be the last night they would spend together. Stephen looked in the mailbox immediately after seeing Emily off. He hadn't gotten much sleep today, and the new envelope was just as welcome. But still, he couldn't help but think about it. What was in it this time? When he got to his office, he immediately opened the envelope and began to study the printed sheets that showed where and when Emily had been last week. After looking at the flash drive video, he thought, this just can't be happening. I have to check this out myself, see for myself. I don't know what kind of crap they sent me in that envelope. The photos could be faked, and the video could be a similar-looking girl, but who would want to do that? And most importantly, why? The thoughts were swirling in his head. He began to suspect the ex-wife, daughter, and even son. Only they benefit to blacken in his eyes Emily to present her as someone who in fact she is not. But how to check? It was necessary to monitor himself and only himself. No hired people, intermediaries and proxies would be suitable for such a case, and she would recognize him as soon as he appeared outside the restaurant. The plan came together very quickly. He went to the store, bought the simplest clothes, a beard, and a wig. When he got home, he tore his pants, his shirt. He took a jacket with scuffs on purpose. With young people, such a trend was very actual, and it was impossible to realize that the traces of poverty on such clothes were not real. He rented the cheapest car and drove it to the restaurant. He parked it in the backyard. He took out a dustpan and a broom from the trunk, which he had brought with him, and started sweeping the street outside the restaurant. He noticed Emily right away. She was serving customers as usual, and at exactly 2 o'clock she left the restaurant and headed for the subway. Oh shit, she's too hard to follow in a car, the man thought to himself. But the first of what was written in the letter was confirmed. The unknown person who sent Stephen the envelope wrote that Emily works at the restaurant only half a day after she leaves the establishment and returns to work only the next day. So she has this schedule on a regular basis. She lies that she spends all days at work except Sunday until late afternoon and then goes home to her sick mom afterward. He's never been to her apartment. She always said his visit would be out of place. Mom can't know about their relationship. After all, they have such a big age difference. Emily didn't know how she would feel about her daughter dating a grown man. Stephen understood her and was sympathetic to the situation. He didn't insist that she introduce him to her mom. But before the wedding, I'll tell her sometime, but only carefully so that there is no chain reaction. You understand, she always said with a sincere smile and a gentle look. When it came to my mom, he offered to pay for the apartment where she and my mom lived, but she refused. He had never been suspicious of such behavior. Stephen was sure that she simply did not want to be dependent on him and that she did not want to sit on his neck early. That it was only a deliberate and very cunning move, he did not even think about. He could not suspect her of anything at all. When they met for the first time, he immediately realized that this girl was not like the others. A family crisis was superimposed on his impression. He fell in love with Emily without a second thought. For him, she was a breath of fresh air in the dark stuffiness in which he had lived for years. By car, he drove to the house he was dropping her off at. It took him exactly the same amount of time to get there as it took her to take the subway. He didn't even count on the driveway. He waited for hours, but he never saw Emily in the yard. It's very hard to keep track of a person like that. He opened the travel schedule that had been sent to him in an envelope. At 5:00 p.m., she usually left the house, got in her car, and drove away. The stranger would follow her on and on. The addresses she went to were written on the slip, but they kept changing from day to day. The only thing that remained the same was the time at which she left the restaurants, left the house, came back, and left again. He sat outside the house until the evening, but he never waited for anyone. Strange, he thought to himself. A man who liked to write anonymous letters could be wrong. Or perhaps she had only been away on business for a week, the very week he had been following her. But what business could there be at night? The sheet clearly stated that she left the restaurant at 2 p.m. every day, then drove home, then left at 5 p.m., returning at 8 p.m. She'd spend an hour at home, leave at 9:00, and not arrive until the morning. She would leave home at exactly 7 and go to work, where she had to be by exactly 9. There were more questions than answers until the end. To be sure that the stranger had written the truth, Stephen could not today. So he would have to follow her tomorrow, and maybe the day after that. He has to know exactly what's going on, see everything with his own eyes. He decided not to stay the night. The fact that he didn't spend the night might cause Camille to ask him unnecessary questions. He didn't need that. He decided to inadvertently find out her plans for the next few days, so that he could follow Emily on the night that Camille would not be home. Stephen guessed that she had a young man, but asked no questions. Let him think that I had not seen her sneaking quietly into her room in the morning when she was not at home at night. This line of behavior was beneficial to him, so as not to spoil the already difficult relationship with his daughter. On the way home, he thought to himself, "I'll do it tomorrow," he thought to himself. He waited for her to leave the restaurant. That afternoon, she walked alone again on the way to the subway. No cars came to pick her up. Stephen went to the car to remove the bum's masquerade. After changing his clothes, he went into the restaurant. "Hello, what will you order?" A pretty girl approached his table. "Coffee," he replied, and took the girl's hand. "Do you want to make money?" "What are you?" "We are forbidden to communicate with customers in such a way. I will now call the administrator. We have a decent establishment." "Is this the wrong place?" "Calm down. That's not what I'm talking about. When's your lunch break?" "We work in shifts. I don't leave for lunch until 2 hours later." "That's fine. If you want to make some money, I'll meet you in the car in the back. Here are the numbers." Stephen quickly wrote them on a napkin and showed them to the girl. "And don't get any ideas for me. I just need some information." Stephen drank his coffee, paid, left the cafe, got in his car, and waited. Exactly 2 hours later, a girl knocked on the window. "Get in." He opened the door and pointed to the girl. "Listen, only that no one will see us here," she asked fearfully. "That's not why I called you here. Will you calm down or not? I told you that's not what I want from you." "What were you thinking? What's your name?" "Wendy. My name is Stephen. I want to ask you something about your partner. Emily, you know, she works at this cafe too. I know you can tell me about her." Stephen opened his wallet and took out some large bills. "Tell me everything you know, and it's all yours." 30,030 at least, thought to herself Wendy. She needed the money, and she didn't want to pawn her friend off. "What exactly are you interested in?" asked Wendy. "I'm interested in everything from what time to what time it works. How many days a week? Where are you from? You're all from here. Don't you talk to each other at work? Don't tell me you don't. I wouldn't believe it anyway. I'm not gonna hide anything from you. Emily and I don't really socialize. Sometimes we cross paths on the shift. We have 2 waiters per shift. They rotate every other day when I work the morning shift. Emily and I cross paths. She works every day except Sunday from 9 to 2. She said when she got here that she wanted a half-day shift. Is there anything else you can tell us about her? I'm telling you, I don't really talk to her much. I know she came to the capital from Lipetsk. Her parents died. They were alcoholics. They didn't even raise Emily. They were always drinking and partying. She had a rough childhood. Her father and mother weren't deprived of their rights. They put her in temporary shelters, sawing her off from time to time to pretend they were getting on with their lives. But you know how provincial foster care is. You can't ask for snow in the winter. There's no room. Well, Emily lived in the neighborhood when she grew up, and when she turned 18, she went to the capital. Her parents have been dead for a year. Her mother drank herself to death, and her father died heroically under a tractor when he was drunk. Emily has been living in the capital for 3 years now. She didn't even go to her parents' funeral. She doesn't want to know them. Well, that's what she said, as if by chance. When I talked to her, it was about life. But I don't know anything else. What's your interest? I don't really have any interest. Wendy thanked Stephen for the money, got out of the car, and went back to the restaurant. She hoped she hadn't said too much. Emily never shared details with her. But what did she do for a living? Wendy had known to make a living and stand up for herself since she was a teenager. She first decided to do it in Lipetsk when she was 17, and then she went down the road. When she managed to save up money to move to the capital, she immediately left her little town. And how did you come here? She got a job in a restaurant. But that money wasn't enough for her. It was just for experience. Maybe she could have made it to manager later on, if she was very lucky. Naturally, she worked part-time. Yes, a lot of girls in the capital do it. But what's the man's interest? She could have told him nothing at all. Well, we don't talk. Why should everyone at work be so frank with each other? But then he wouldn't have paid her anything. Okay, it's every man for himself. Let Emily sort it out for herself, Wendy thought, to drown out her anxious thoughts. They were never close friends, but they shared the same problems. Wendy had slept over a few times when her landlords kicked out the money from the rented room she'd lent her to. Emily always had it, and Wendy knew exactly where it came from, but she would never have done it herself. In this, they were quite unlike each other, naturally. About the groom and the wedding, Emily did not tell her anything. She had never been a fool and realized that at any moment her friend could accidentally tell her something about her that her future husband should not know. Their introduction she hadn't caught on. When Stephen had first dropped by this cafe for a cup of coffee, there had been another shift. Wendy wasn't there that day, so she couldn't recognize him either, because she'd never seen him. So she was lying to me. She doesn't have a sick mom. She lives alone. Her father didn't die of cancer either. He just drank himself to death. Stephen thought to himself. He was so angry that he couldn't move. How could she do that to him? He would have done anything for her. He wanted to believe that she was only lying about her mother, about her work schedule, about her father. But deep down, he realized who his beloved really was. How should he treat her now? What should he do with all this? Maybe he's wrong after all. Just in this restaurant do not pay so much, and so she works here only in the morning. And in the second, working in some other place, he did not say anything because she did not want to seem mercantile. That's what he wanted to think. But he realized he was just wallowing in his own illusions. Still, even though everything was more than obvious, he wanted to see for himself with his own eyes. The next day, he decided to follow again. And he finally managed to see what he had been waiting for. At night, his Camille heard John's joyful voice in the receiver. The information from Lipetsk has arrived. Today, my acquaintance called. Already everything has been forwarded to my email. Hurrah! Finally, joyfully replied the girl. In general, you know father the last few days as if not himself, and Emily doesn't call him. He used to call her every day like a schedule, to find out where she was, what she was doing, when she would come to him. But now it's been quiet for days. What's up? We'll meet at the old place. I'll call Christopher, or you'll come to my place. We'll tell him all about it later. Yeah, Christopher. He and Jenna kind of had a fight. She did start asking him where he's always disappearing to at night. So he's got nothing to hide. He's been with us the whole time. What? She doesn't trust him? Yes, she trusts him. But what kind of wife likes her husband coming home at midnight? He doesn't explain anything. Well, let me come over tonight and meet Christopher tomorrow, but only in the afternoon. We'll try and meet in the city. Okay, then I'll meet you tonight. You can take a cab yourself. Or should I pick you up? Yes, I'll drive myself. Camille left him a note saying she wouldn't be home tonight. 2 days ago, he would have been happy to be able to leave the house at night without being asked. But tonight he had absolutely no reason to. He had already seen everything he wanted to see. He didn't need any more proof. He was furious. He hadn't felt this way in a long time. Why hadn't he realized who she really was? The old fool had fallen for the talk of love. And he thought she was sincere with him. And he himself had never agreed that a young girl could not love a mature man. He didn't listen to the arguments. Camille was hurting. His daughter left his wife. And for whose sake? For the sake of a girl who not only cheated on him, but could be the biggest disgrace of his life. He didn't even immediately react to the phone call. It was Emily calling, apparently starting to worry about why he hasn't been in touch in days. She thinks she's more cunning and clever than everyone else. I'm a grown man almost fooled by some provincial girl. He thought to himself, "Hello, Stephen, can you hear me? Why aren't you answering the phone?" He heard Emily's voice. I'm calling. I called you yesterday too. You're not answering the phone. Is something wrong?" He didn't know what to say to her. This was clearly not a phone conversation. You don't discuss things like that. That's it. That's not right. On the one hand, he knew they had to explain themselves, but on the other, he was clearly aware that he might not be able to hold back. He rarely snapped, but this was one of those times when he wanted to destroy her without a word. It wasn't even that she'd lied to him and wanted to take advantage of him. It was the fact that he was willing to give her anything she wanted. She could quit her job, move in with him, live and need nothing. Why did she keep doing what she had done for years before? Why lie to him, telling him stories about her sick mom? She wanted to sympathize with him. He already sympathized with her and understood. He didn't need any reason to feel sorry for her and help support her. But apparently that would never be enough for her. She's incorrigible. I'm sorry, I'm just not feeling well. And I've had a lot of work to do, so I haven't picked up the phone. I haven't picked up the phone in days, so I just haven't seen your calls. How are you? Stephen answered calmly. Yes, I'm fine. There's good news. Mom's feeling better already. I can move in with you permanently. The only thing is that she should hire a nurse. I'm gonna be at work. And then if I move in with you, I won't be able to visit her as often. She's all alone. But you know that. There was a dead silence on the phone. It lasted about 5 minutes, and Stephen could not find the right words to answer it. Hello, Stephen, can you hear me at all? Emily's loud voice sobered him. Yes, he answered confusedly. I'm sorry, love. I was just thinking. I told you. There's a lot to do and I don't feel well. Let's you come tomorrow, and we'll discuss everything calmly and well. I'll bring the stuff later. You'll come with me, because I can't do it alone. Yeah, I'll see you tomorrow. I'll try to recover by then so we can talk about it. Kisses by Stephen hung up the phone. He had never felt so crushed. He had dreamed of her moving in with him. But after everything he'd learned about her, it was hardly possible. He wondered why Emily would need a fake caregiver for her long-dead mom. Like money for personal expenses for the fact that she would now be living under the same roof with me and spending all her free time on me. I wonder how much she'll ask for. A thought flashed through his mind. It made him even more angry. That evening he spent in his office behind a closed door. He didn't want to see anyone or talk to anyone about anything. So father is home alone tonight without his nanny, grinned John, as soon as Camille crossed the threshold of his apartment. Yeah, I have no idea. When I left this morning, I left him a note saying I wasn't coming home tonight. And after all, how much control can he and I have over each other? He's a grown-up, and I'm a big girl. I'm moving into my own apartment soon, and I'm certainly not going to report to him, Camille replied. Come on, Let's see what you've got. We're not going to spend the whole evening on my father and his problems. Well, look, the first 2 letters are in the mail. There is all the information on our Emily computer without password, so it'll download right away. And I'll make tea. Camille opened the letters and began to read them carefully. The biography is very brief, but quite detailed. Some photos from her childhood, teenage years with the local gang, and here was the very thing she wanted to see. Wow, your friend even found pictures like this, she said with a smirk of undisguised pleasure. Look, but I gave the man a lot of money for information. He decided to dig in detail. And there you understand. The city is small. No one will not refuse to earn extra money. Emily's not a famous person, of course, but she's got something on her. Yeah, she's not a criminal with no criminal record. But in her neighborhood, her neighbors know a lot about her. And the neighbors took the photos from where? Look, to be honest, I don't know. I didn't ask. I asked for information. I paid the money and they gave it to me. I didn't go into detail about what and where he got it from. You tell me, we'll print it all out and put it in an envelope for my dad. Oh, I don't know. I don't know if I'll make it home before Daddy wakes up. Camille said playfully. All right, type, we'll do our best. Do you have any envelopes left? Do I? Yes, I do. Don't worry. Back home, Camille put another envelope in the mailbox. Today was her day off. She planned to get some sleep and then go and check on the renovations to the apartment. She really wanted to move in as soon as the problem with her father was over. And I'll be sure he's all right. I'll get my own place, she thought to herself. How are you going to explain all this to me? Stephen shouted, spreading pictures and pieces of paper across the table. What's this? He turned on the videotape and grabbed Emily by the hair, guiding her head toward the computer screen. He had never been so angry in his life. The rage was literally tearing him from the inside out. Let go. The girl shrieked. Get your hands off me. Let's talk normally. What are you going to tell me now? That it's all a lie, a montage? Yes, if I had not seen with my own eyes how you got into the car near the restaurant to some man, and then you drove out of town. I followed you. And I don't even want to say the rest of it because it's disgusting. Why did you lie to me? That your mom was sick? Yeah, my parents are alcoholics who died a long time ago. You think I don't know that you were already doing it in Lipetsk? Here, look, admire it. He continued to poke Emily under her nose with photos that certainly did not prove that she slept with men for money, but allowed to build quite adequate assumptions. I was ready to do everything for you. I even wanted to get the property transferred to you before the wedding. Why did you keep giving all those assholes money? Would you stop taking them? I have the money. Become my wife and live happily ever after. You have such a nasty nature. You can't live without all those assholes who change hands like gloves. How many have you had? Emily wanted to explain everything to him, but she was afraid to say a word. She realized that he was in an inadequate state, completely out of control. She was scared, but at the same time she realized how right she was not to depend on him. They're all the same. They all want the same thing. She thought to herself about not being able to trust men. She had known since she was a teenager. She had seen how parents and neighbors lived, how drunken husbands beat their wives to death, then apologized, repented, and they forgave them. She also saw how desperate the neighboring women dragged anyone into the house so that there was at least some help. Second paycheck. Was there anyone to chop wood? I knew how these stepfathers raped their stepdaughters, and they could do nothing, and their mothers covered for them. Marrying a wealthy man wasn't what she wanted in life. Independence, that's what she really wanted. Stephen was in her plans, but only temporarily. She wasn't lying when she agreed to be his wife, but it wouldn't be forever. She knew he wanted to sign over all the property to her. She also knew that after the divorce, she could also get half of his fortune. That would be enough money for the rest of her life. And anyone else in her place would have quit prostitution, afraid of compromising herself, behaving perfectly. But she wasn't going to give up her regular clients for meetings with whom she received handsome rewards. It was guaranteed. There's marriage. It was not yet certain that the wedding would take place and she would get hers. That Camille hated her, Emily was well aware of. There was no guarantee that she couldn't have pressured her father not to give anything to his new wife. Her scheme to meet wealthy men had been honed to perfection. It was for this purpose that she got a job in a cozy restaurant in the heart of the capital. Wealthy young men often came there for coffee. Stephen was the third man with whom she was in a steady relationship. There were 2 others before that, but they had no idea what she was really up to. They didn't offer her hand in marriage either, but no gifts or money. She met real clients at the Titan Club, where she worked as a bartender. Men came there for specific purposes, and she knew it well. One-off dating promotions didn't interest her. She made acquaintances for stable meetings several times a week, for which she received not the smallest money. A sick mom, she made up to meet with him less often. At some point, she started to run out of time for other men. It was just an excuse, and refused money and help, because she immediately realized the fish had taken a big bite. She took exactly as much money and accepted as much help as she could without arousing suspicion. If he did marry her, that would be great. But that marriage wouldn't make any sense without the property being rewritten, and half of his fortune after the divorce to stake solely on him. She wasn't going to, but she hadn't even had a thought that he'd start following her. Here she had certainly miscalculated giving birth. No children she was not going to have, so she shrugged it off. The same way she would behave in marriage until she got hers. She had always felt that devoting herself and her whole life to her family and husband was too expensive. She had completely different plans for her life. What's going on in here? Camille, who had heard the screams and sobs before she had entered the house, shouted, "Father, leave her alone. Do you want to go to jail?" Camille barely managed to pull her father away from Emily, whom he was choking with undisguised rage. "What's the matter? What's the scandal? Daddy, explain to me what this is all about." Camille continued to ask questions, even though she understood what had happened. Emily sat on the floor and sobbed. She didn't even have the strength to move. Her dress was torn, her mascara smeared over her eyes. Stephen's eyes burned with an evil fire. "All right, you and I are gonna go talk. You get yourself cleaned up. And you, Dad, get some rest. I'll lock you in the study and you can sit down and calm down," said Camille. She was done. She managed to close the door before Stephen came to his senses and started smashing things around. After Camille left, he smashed his laptop, dropped 2 cabinets, knocked over a chair, and then sat on the couch and sobbed. He had never been in so much pain before. He couldn't understand why he'd been betrayed so foully. "Here's a towel. Go to the shower to wash and change," Camille said, holding out clean underwear and clothes to Emily. "I'll make tea for now, then we'll talk." Camille heard her father calm down and stop throwing furniture. There was a sepulchral silence in the study. Emily came out of the shower and sat down at the table after changing her clothes. Camille looked at her sternly and said, "I know why all this happened. You don't have to explain to me. You'd better get out of our house and forget about coming here." "So you knew everything?" the girl asked, surprised. "Yes, Emily, not only did we know, but we told your father what you really were. And Stephen told me that he had been following me himself. Maybe when he got the envelopes with the pictures and charts of your movements, where you went and what time you went, he decided to follow you himself. So you've been following me too. I don't get it at all. Why didn't I like you in the first place? I knew you were only in it with your father for the money. You ruined my family. Dad left my mom, who lived with him all her life. She devoted herself to the family. He wanted to sign over to you all the property he had earned over the years that you had nothing to do with. You thought I was just gonna let it go. I knew there was a catch in your love for your father, and I found him. My brother and I had a private investigator we knew follow you, record your every move. He followed you for a week. Then we slipped those photos to Dad. Maybe he wanted to make sure the photos and videos were authentic. So you didn't tell him you were following me? No, Emily didn't. We planted the emails anonymously. In fact, don't you think you're asking too many questions? This is a family matter. I told you you'd better get out of here and forget you ever knew my father. Drink your tea and go. I can give you money for a cab. No, thanks. I've got the money. Thank you, Camille. If it wasn't for you, you saved my life. He would have killed me for sure if you hadn't come. Yeah, you're really lucky. After Emily left, Camille went into her father's office. Dad, she said quietly, carefully, opening the door. Relieved, Stephen sat on the floor with his arms around his head. There was a glass next to him. What are you doing here? He asked, raising his eyes full of sadness and tears at her. Daddy, you are very lucky that I was not at work today and went to see the repairs in the apartment. You almost killed her, Camille said. And I would have, if you hadn't shown up. Yeah, and then you would have gone to jail. That's a good prospect. It'll pass. Dad, you'll feel better in time. And in a few months, you'll forget about her altogether. We're your family, and me and Christopher will always be there for you. Come on, get up. I'll take you to your room. You need to rest. I want to be alone. Close the door behind you, please. Really, it's all right. But I don't want to see anyone right now. Camille hugged her father tightly and then went to her room. It's been 6 months. Dad, I have a wedding the day after tomorrow. Mom will be there, Camille said. I invited her. In fact, I've never told you about it until now. But I think you need to talk. Stephen hadn't spoken to Evelyn since their divorce. All that time, he had occasionally thought of her, but not only as the woman he had once loved and with whom he had shared a long life with 2 children, but also as the person he had betrayed. In time, he realized that it was the most real betrayal, a despicable act that could not be corrected and forgiven. He wasn't ready to face her, but Camille was right that they did have a lot to talk about. Yes, daughter. Is it right that you invited her? You were great to support her through that difficult period after our divorce. I didn't do the best thing. Dad, those aren't the right words. You betrayed our family, your wife who gave you her whole life, your children who you wanted to disinherit, and all for who? It was only with time that Stephen realized his crush on Emily was just a fling. Life happens in many ways. There are crises in the family, and not everyone is able to go through the trials they have to face. And it broke like an old locker door that had been opened too many times and had dangling hinges. Stephen analyzed his life and increasingly came to the conclusion that he had treated his ex-wife unfairly. I mean, she had genuinely loved him. All her life, she'd made sacrifices for him. And at a certain point, it became a burden to him. He started taking it out on her, accusing her of things that were never her fault. Camille, I wanted to say something to you that I never said. I'm so grateful to you. It wasn't until I found out the work you'd done to save me from marrying a woman who would knowingly betray me. I realized what a real family is. We fought so much back then. I didn't listen to you. I didn't want to hear you. Forgive me, Stephen dared to say it to his daughter for the first time in a long time. He didn't know how to apologize. He didn't know how to admit his guilt. Deep down, he could be truly remorseful, but he had never had the courage to say it out loud. He had always been a strong-willed man, not only in the eyes of others, but also in his own family. And in reality, it was completely unnecessary. Their family lacked honesty and trust. He realized this only with time, and now it seemed to him that he realized it too late. Dad, I forgave you a long time ago. Our family wouldn't be a family if we'd left you at that moment. It's just that support isn't always about agreeing with a person and all their actions. Sometimes loved ones can behave very harshly and even cruelly if that is what it takes to help a person. I'm even glad that things turned out this way. If it were not for your story with Emily, I would never have met John, who has become the closest person to me. I think it's because of you and your failed young wife. I met my true love, Camille said. Yes, daughter, you're right. Everything is for the best. But we don't always realize that at once. Stephen agreed with her. You're so wise. You're like my mother. For the first time in a long time, he noticed how much Camille resembled Evelyn. He hadn't paid any attention to it before, but in the time that he hadn't seen his ex-wife, it was as if he'd begun to notice more and more of her traits in his daughter. He was afraid to admit that he missed her, even to himself, when he was alone with his thoughts. After talking to his daughter, he thought about how he would look her in the eye, what he would say to her, and whether she would ever be able to forgive him, or whether she had already forgiven him, but had forgotten him forever. Stephen's greatest fear was that she had met another man, more loving, caring, and worthy of her loyalty and devotion. But could there be anyone more worthy than him? He used to be sure there was, but now he thought quite differently. Christopher, what's your due date? Evelyn asked, looking at Jenna. We're still small, only 3 months, Christopher answered with a happy smile on his face. Have you been looking forward to this? I'm so happy for you. Jenna, you take care of yourself. And you, Christopher, take care of your wife. She's not alone anymore. You've got 2 to take care of. Christopher was very happy when he found out Jenna was having a baby. They had been dreaming about it for so long, but they had been busy dealing with daddy issues. They almost had a fight. Jenna suspected that Christopher had more important things to do than family. But what could be more important? Mom, you still haven't talked to Dad? Christopher asked. Camille was just asking how worried we are about you. You know all about it, son. I'll be sure to talk to him. There wasn't time after the wedding. And then it got busy. It got busy. You can see how busy I've been. I still haven't had time to organize everything after the second move. It seems to me that with my wishes for the interior will take more than 1 year to buy and furnish everything. Evelyn was lying to herself and subconsciously realized it. When she had seen him at the wedding, she couldn't even answer herself how she had felt then. She remembered everything from beginning to end. After the divorce, their entire married life had been brought before her eyes more than once. She may have been wrong about something too, but his act could not be made up for in any way. The day Evelyn found out he had another woman, and one who was old enough to be his daughter, her world had fallen apart for her. She knew how it ended, but it didn't make it any easier. At the wedding, other than a cold hello, she hadn't been able to say anything to him. This man had not become a stranger to her, but she couldn't forgive his betrayal, even though she missed him very much. What about Camille? She hasn't called in a while. She must have been busy with chores and worrying about her son. Evelyn, Mom, but they're in the middle of settling into their family nest. Camille's just like you. This isn't right for her. She doesn't like it here. She doesn't like it there. They could just move into John's apartment and call it a day. But she wants them to live in her apartment. She's got new renovations she can't finish. It's been months. Then they were planning a wedding trip. I told her that you go on a trip on your honeymoon, the first month after the wedding. But you know your daughter. She joked that you don't have to follow any rules to be happy. But she's right about that. What's wrong with that? Evelyn grinned. Yes, it's true. Only John hasn't realized that he'll never be bored now. Christopher laughed. Come on, you just want to criticize your sister. What are you like? Always active, always doing something, just like your dad. Okay, we're going. We're the ones with a lot to do. Don't forget what you have to do well. Son, I'm not a little girl. I'll figure it out. Evelyn looked out the window and tried to figure out how she felt. It definitely wasn't loneliness. She'd learned to live alone a long time ago. And in a way, she even liked it. Every once in a while, she'd encounter the occasional bout of homesickness. But that doesn't just happen to lonely people. And yet Evelyn tried to run away from herself, to run away without a trace so that not even a memory remained. But I couldn't do it. And that was something she had to admit to herself first of all. She picked up the phone and dialed a familiar number. "Hello, Stephen," she said quietly when he picked up. "It's Evelyn." "I recognize your voice," he answered. "Do you think I could have forgotten it so quickly?" "No, it's just a matter of time." "You're okay." "I'm fine, Anyway, if you don't mind, we should get together. I think we have a lot to talk about." "I think so, too. Come to our house." She didn't even bother to ask what he meant. He was talking about the house that was still theirs, but only temporarily empty due to circumstances. Stephen and Evelyn had reconciled. The man realized that for him, there was and had never been anyone more precious than his wife. He'd spent his whole life with her. She had given him a piece of her soul. But only after everything that happened in their family, he realized how important and valuable it was. They got married again and celebrated their celebration in a modest family circle, starting a new countdown of years of life together. Christopher and Jenna had a daughter. They named her in honor of her sister Camille. They decided that with this name, the girl will go far in life, and from her aunt will inherit a spirited character, the ability to go to the end and never give up. When Camille and John finally finished renovating their apartment, they did not need it. After reconciling with her husband, Evelyn and Stephen suggested that they move in with them and live together. The house is big, and there is enough room for everyone. Not only Camille and John, but also Jenna and Christopher moved in. Evelyn is very happy to help Jenna with the upbringing of her granddaughter. The young people have rented out their apartments so that they don't just sit idle. One day, the whole family saw a foreign program on TV. Camille immediately recognized the presenter. It was the same Emily who had almost played a fatal role in the family's fate. She went to Europe, where she found herself, became famous, hosts her own fashion and beauty program, acts in movies. Not the least role in her life played escort, to which she was so attracted from her youth. It was he who helped her achieve everything she had now. Stephen at first did not even recognize her, realized that this was the girl he wanted to marry and throw the whole world at her feet. Only when his daughter told him about it, he felt absolutely nothing towards her. Dyed with silicone, stylishly dressed, an ordinary soulless doll, what thousands he hadn't noticed at the time. But he saw it clearly. Now about this stage of his life, he never regretted it. With time, he was able to look at what had happened. On the other hand, if he had not met Emily on his way, if he had not fallen in love with her, if he had not left his wife and argued with his children, he would never have realized how much he loved his family, a real family of people who are always there for him, who never leave him in trouble and are ready to help, even if they are not asked, because they feel that a loved one needs their support, without any explanations or words.